Hi, it's Calvin Niles, the mindful storyteller, and I am delighted to share with you stories of awakening. Each week, I'm going to be talking to people from around the world of various backgrounds and experiences. People I love, I know, and people I admire, but also those who are completely new to me. One thing all my guests will have in common is that they have been through a journey of awakening. By awakening, I mean a call to higher consciousness and deeper self-awareness beyond material reality. These stories will be real, challenging, funny, stimulating, and insightful. We're going to take our good time with these conversations. So listen from your comfy chair with your favorite drink, or on your weekend stroll, your morning routine, or whatever makes you happy. Stories of Awakening with me, Calvin Niles, and I look forward to you tuning in. Welcome, Stephen R. Marriott, my friend, author, and actually, Steve is a good friend of mine, so I'm really delighted to have Steve on here. But there will be some things about Steve I don't know, and I thought this would be a good opportunity to learn a bit more about you, Steve, and your own journey of awakening, as I'm calling this series. So thanks for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me on the show, Calvin, and I will try my best to surprise you with some things that you don't know about me, because you probably know quite a lot by now.
Well, I do know that you are not only a very interesting writer in terms of your stories, but there was some stuff in there, and when it comes to stories, we know that like people say, you are always in all of your characters and things like
Mhm.
that. And there were some things in your characters which made me realize that, you've had your own waking up in terms of, coming to an awareness of a greater reality than just the traditional material world.
Mhm.
And yeah, just where did your story start in terms of realizing that, there was a higher consciousness or there was more to life than
Mm. I
just the
guess,
mundane?
yeah. Well, I guess you might say it probably started at a point where I was at a crisis of purpose in many ways, and I guess the catalyst for that crisis and looking for purpose was a point when I realised I wasn't happy with the way my life was, and perhaps I wasn't on purpose at that point. But it needed a crisis, perhaps, to shake me up and start to become aware of that. So that was at a point going back to 2000, 2011, something like that, 2010, 11, something like that. So around 10 years ago now. And unfortunately, I was going through a separation with my wife, and that was unexpected. And I was also unhappy with my corporate career job, working in stockbroking, and so in the investment world in the City of London. And it had given me pleasure in the past. It was exciting to begin with, but I was no longer satisfied, I guess, with, at the end of the day, whilst that area for some people seems glamorous, the city, it's still a 9 to 5 job in an office. Okay, maybe 8 to 6 p.m., 7 p.m. But it's, that was an office job which no longer gave me pleasure. And I was looking for other things, but I didn't quite know what I was looking for. I just know I needed some change of career. I needed something different in my life, and then with um, my wife leaving me, um, um, that was a real big push to go and find what that was. So yeah, and I've always loved travel, and the way that it seemed to me to find the answers to that, and to sort of put some distance between my old life and the pain I was suffering from, and the confusion, was to go traveling, sort of backpacking traveling, which I love, to South America and Asia. So that was the catalyst, which kind of didn't immediately lead to an awakening. That took a while, and yeah, quite a few things happened on the way to the actual point where I realised I was different. I was changing. I was, as you kind of put it, more aware of something higher than just the physical materialistic world, as you know,
Mm.
as you've suggested. I mean, I can go on, or about what that was, or I
Yeah,
guess I
yeah.
was sort of talking quite at length. Shall I? Because this is a story which will, yeah, there's a story connected to this. So I do my best to be brief about that, because I know we want to have this is a discussion and not just about me waffling at length.
Yeah, but I mean, it is interesting, and you talked about basically almost running away from pain, I guess. Would you
Yes,
say?
that's probably a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. And while you were running away from pain, you weren't asking those deeper questions yet, were you? Were you starting to ask it, or you were just literally like, I just need to run away from this pain? Hi, if you're enjoying this conversation, you might like SOAR Book Club. Many similar conversations are happening in SOAR Book Club, a book club for the spiritually curious. If you like spiritual books and community, then why not join SOAR, where we can grow together, learn together in a fun and nurturing environment. Click the link below in the description to find out more about SOAR Book Club, or to find out how you can join. It'd be nice to see you there.
I think it was, yes, I need to get away. I need to run away. Of course, I was aware that with some space and distance, I might figure a few things out about what I might do next. But yes, you might call it running away. And I guess the best way I knew to run away, or to get to a different place, was to go traveling again, because I'd done quite a bit of traveling in the past and backpacking, and I previously had a gap year in South America. And there were places which I wanted to revisit, or places I didn't get a chance to go to before, which I wanted to explore. So that's what I did. I went to South America for several months. Didn't really sort of ask deep questions there. No, I had a good time, and had some interesting experiences. And then I actually went on to Asia and did a little bit of traveling there. And again, brilliant experiences. Met a lot of different people, experienced some different cultures in places like Thailand, Laos, for example, Malaysia. And then when I returned to London, you might say, whilst I'd had those experiences, new and some of them fresh experiences, I felt no better in myself than I had done before. There were no exact answers there. And returning to London, I was perhaps in a worse situation, because my flat was still tenanted. It was let out, so I actually had nowhere to live when I returned. I didn't have a job this time, and I wasn't on the move, so I didn't really have that much of sense of purpose there. Luckily, some friends had put me up in a flat of theirs, which was available. So I was crashing at a flat in central London, near Blackfriars.
Mm-hmm.
And
my old home where I used to work.
Exactly, actually, only round the corner from where you used to be. Actually, it was I was in a and basically one Monday night, being on my own, because I was on my own at a friend's house. It was a kind of a typical grey London rainy night, miserable night, and weather-wise. And I went to this pub, and I was the only person in the pub, and there was a Polish man in the pub, and he must have just looked at the way I was sort of glumly sipping my pint of beer, that I wasn't very happy. And literally, he came from around the bar and said, and his first words were, apart from when he obviously must have served me the beer earlier, was, "You need to walk the Camino de Santiago." And I'm right, okay, right. And I thought, that's interesting, because when I'd returned to England on the plane, literally a few days before, I'd been watching a film called The Way, which was basically a story taking place on the Camino de Santiago. So I'm like, this is interesting. So that's twice in the space of a few days that the idea of the Camino de Santiago pilgrimage had come into my life. And
this is a pilgrimage that the old Catholics would use on the way through Europe. Is that right?
Basically, yes. It was the second biggest pilgrimage in Europe after the pilgrimage to Rome. And at its height in medieval times, about 1 million pilgrims, walkers made this pilgrimage to Santiago de Compostela in northwest Spain in the region of Galicia. And the traditional route that you walk now is about an 800-kilometer route from actually just in the French town in the Pyrenees called Saint-Jean-de-Pied-de-Port. But so it's a well-known pilgrimage, but people, don't just do it for religious reasons now. They do it for spiritual reasons, cultural reasons, the challenge, and lots of different reasons. So of course some people still do it as a Catholic pilgrimage. Anyway, so this Polish barman has said to me, you should walk the Camino de Santiago. And then he went on to explain that he had walked it, and it gave him the courage. After completing it, it gave him the courage to leave Poland, leave his fiancée, leave his job in hospitality, and come to London and seek out his dream of being a film director. And so he was working and lodging in the pub. He had become the assistant manager. But just that week, him and his producer friend had raised £1 million to make their own independent film. So that was an amazing story to have heard and kind of lifted my spirits.
So by that time, you had only heard about the Camino de Santiago twice now. First, you heard about it on the plane.
Yes.
And then watching this film, The Way, and then you had this guy. So it was like a kind of sign. You took that as a sign.
Not initially, but I was getting curious. And it wasn't the first time I heard about the Camino de Santiago. 10 years prior to that, somebody had told me about the Camino de Santiago, and I'd kind of thought of it and thought, well, that would be a great experience. I'd love Spain and things, like, as a great cultural experience, a great thing to do. But I'd sort of forgotten about it, but somehow it'd been sort of banked in my memory. And then this reminded me, it was like, oh yeah, he's talking about this thing called the Camino de Santiago. What I should say is actually this pub I was sat in was just around the corner from what's known as the Confraternity of St. James, which is the British Association, which helps pilgrims guide and gives pilgrims information about the Camino de Santiago. So it's the #1 organisation in the UK related to the pilgrimage. So, and that pub was literally just around the corner from it. So anyway, I don't think at the time I even made that connection, but it was only later that I realised the pub was around there. So yeah, those were two signs, and then a third sign came about a week or so later when I met a friend, and we went to Waterstone's bookshop because he wanted to buy a book for a friend of his who was going to post to this friend, and that book is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. So already sort of a quirky name, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But I didn't pay much attention to that particular book title. We went into the bookshop, Waterstones. I left him to go and find the book, and as ever, I was drawn to the travel section of the bookstore, and sort of flicking through the books and things. I found myself drawn to one book, and it was a Paulo Coelho book, but it wasn't his famous book, The Pilgrimage, that everybody who dips into spirituality and books will be aware of. The Pilgrimage. It was actually his first book, and I always thought The Pilgrimage was his first book. Sorry, I always thought not The Pilgrimage, The
Alchemist.
The Alchemist, sorry. The Alchemist was his first book, but it wasn't. This book I'd found called The Pilgrimage of his first book. In actual fact, it's a biographical account of him walking to Santiago in the late 80s. And it was when he reached Santiago, it had given him the courage to give up his life in Brazil as working in the music industry and to become a writer. So he had written his account, the Pilgrimage, and then he went on to read the Alchemist, which has become a worldwide bestseller, etc. And he committed to being an author. So I was like, wow, here's another sign or some more information about the connection to the Camino. Anyway, I did take that as a sign at that point. And as I say, I hadn't found the answers going traveling. I didn't feel any happier with myself having returned, and with my flat still rented out and crashing at some a friend's pad. I think within about a couple of weeks, I packed my rucksack again and went off to Spain, or on the French side, where it starts in the Pyrenees, at the start of this 800-kilometer pilgrimage. And I still didn't even know it then at the start that this was going to be my awakening point. Right. But it was during this pilgrimage that I think that's when these awakening moments began to blossom.
So this invisible hand is guiding you,
You
basically,
might say that,
to
yes.
take this pilgrimage. But
Mm,
obviously, it's not only is it invisible, but
mm.
you hadn't even questioned whether anything was pointing for you to take this journey until the third sign.
Yeah, and it's just, and again, I didn't know, I know what that would be about exactly. I was still fairly naive about the pilgrimage. I bought a
Yeah,
guidebook, and
yeah,
so and I'd seen the film The Way,
yeah,
um, but I kind of felt, well, I'm not doing anything now, I'm just trudging water here. My previous travels were great, but they hadn't made me any happier, and I hadn't really dealt with where I was going to go next. So I just thought, well, this is the next place I'm going to go. It just
yeah,
seems
yeah.
obvious. So that's that. As what I'm going to do next. And it wasn't walking the Camino de Santiago. It was not an expensive thing to do. I could
Mm,
just go. It's more
mm.
of a case of just getting myself there, and packing a rucksack for 30, which I'd need for things for 30 days walking.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The thing is, and I remember actually you telling me this story, like what triggered or what catalyzed this
Yes.
journey to do the Santiago. But I'm starting to see now that I actually didn't ever hear when on that journey you actually had your first aha, like, yes, there is more here. So I'm
Hmm.
actually excited to hear what that is actually. So you got there, and then yeah, so what was a big sort of thing that happened when you ended up taking this journey? So you followed the signs. The signs came.
Yes.
They say all the signs. Everything comes in threes. Yeah. Okay. So you got
Hmm.
these three signs: the way, the guy in the pub, and then the pilgrimage. And then you're like,
Yes, the book.
okay,
Yeah.
the book from Paulo Coelho's book. So then you go on this journey. You get there, and what happened there to change your reality?
Mm. Well, I think it took me 31 days to walk. It's about 800 kilometers. So on average, there's about 25 kilometers of daily walking across different region, North Spain, different regions, different terrain. A lot of countryside, villages, towns, even some cities. And I think it was an evolving process. And some people, again, this is only after I kind of learned this or saw it, really observed, is that the Camino is a bit like life condensed into a short period of time, because and in my case 31 days. You have sort of the start, um, the uncertainty, you're finding your way, you're growing, you're finding your strength to get fit for purpose as you walk all
Mm,
this journey. Um, Maybe after that first sort of quarter or a third, you start to build confidence and strength and a little bit more awareness about yourself. But then there's always challenges and mishaps. Everyone has an injury, whether it's just something like blisters, which I had after about 10 or 11 days, and that was a problem. Or you pull a muscle, or people do get shin splints, or something worse happens to them, and people even unfortunately die on the way, because of ill health, or they're elderly or something.
hmm.
There's a lot of crosses on the way where people have died and remembered. And then I think there's a point called the Meseta, which is about halfway through, and that is a very sort of monotonous sort of 2.5 to 3 days of walking. It's on the highlands, it's flat, it's very agricultural, but there isn't anything more apart from a couple of villages dotted through that. And you might sort of say this is your point of sort of death almost. It's a point where you're trudging, and it's tough and it's challenging, and you sort of have to go inside yourself to sort of to deal with that
Yeah.
sort of landscape and things. So that's a problem. And then you might say you get to the end, or towards the end, and you start to sort of, I think, have some. You've met a lot of people in the way. You've learned some of their stories. You've had the time to either walk on your own or with other people. And towards the end, it feels a little bit like a rebirth, because the journey is, is coming to an end, and you're forced sometimes to talk to yourself inside, and so, I mean, I'll put it in a very broad sense, but what I would say for me is it was overwhelming, the idea to begin with, that I've got to walk 800 kilometers or so, um, And so, like a lot of people, you march very fast. You know, you're thinking, I've got to walk fast. I've got to walk fast. I've got to narrow this journey down. Eventually, you realise that's impossible. I'm going to definitely get some injuries. And I think after about 3 days or so of that, and I finally realised I've got to slow down. And I didn't have any deadline. I didn't have to catch a plane at the end of it at a certain date, so I could slow down. You know, I had nothing to return to in London at that point. My flat was still let out, so I learned to slow down. And then that's when interesting things started to happen. I think I was keeping a journal. You know, there's the daily diary, and I think at that point, maybe when I started to slow down, I started to be more aware. You know, I'd actually look back and turn around at where I'd come from, the scenery. You know, look at what the fauna was, or what flowers there were, and you know, the rivers, and be aware of nature around me. And I
Mm.
think my notes started to become a bit more detailed, and they started to become a bit more richer for that. And also, I started to engage with people more. I made a group of Italian friends who I walked with on and off, and I started to meet, engage more and learn about their stories. And even a couple of them who didn't speak English and I didn't speak Italian, but we found a way to communicate, you know, through gesturing and the shared experience. Or some people would interpret sometimes for us. So I think my experience started to become richer when I
Mhm.
slowed down, and as I started to just settle into that life for the next. No, I didn't sort of say I have to be here by this time. I just settled into it and took each day as it came, and the day was just as simple as walking,
Mm.
eating, sleeping, breathing in a sort of in shared hostels which you stay in, albergues as they call them in Spain, you know, with lots of other individuals, and we were just sharing the same experience. And I think then your mind settles. You know, my life is simple. I'm no longer thinking, okay, about the problems back at home or what I'm going to do next. Nothing was being forced. It was just the routine of walking, knowing I've got a destination of mine, and when I arrive, I arrive. And I think that was the point that slowly but surely my mind was settling, and I was starting to be perhaps aware um, that there were other forces at play in a way. I
Mm.
didn't quite know how to explain that or verbalize that, but things were definitely happening there. This is when I look back at it and realize, yeah, my notes were definitely becoming richer in my diary, for
Yeah.
example.
Yeah. That's really interesting. So it basically you had to slow down and your mind went quiet before you were able to perceive a kind of new layer of
Hmm.
reality at that
Hmm.
moment. But this wasn't like a I can see this thing suddenly. You kind of retrospectively realize that.
Yes, it was a gradual process, and perhaps maybe some of my language was changing a bit. And I think um, talking to people and seeing things, I think, yeah, my language was becoming a more aware of subtleties, you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
that you might see. I don't know, observing, I don't know, silly things. But they're not silly really, but like a line of ants, you know, marching along and doing their thing, or a bee pollinating different flowers, and these sort of or a butterfly just two butterflies doing their thing, kind of flying together but never getting tangled up in each other, so sort of free and independent but sort of working together doing the same thing. And I just, the subtleties of nature and things, and subtleties of life, and then hearing other people's stories. And a lot of people walk because they have serious problems, and then it's sort of help put life into context a bit as well.
Yeah. 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 So by this time, the mind is starting to go calm because, this walking has essentially allowed you to process some things, I would guess, from,
Mhm.
your separation and all the life changes you were going through. And then what happened? Was there a moment where you went definitively, you realized consciously, you went, yes, yeah, this is a different, I am different. This is a new level of reality now.
Yeah, it's
Did
hard
that
to
happen? Did
yeah.
that happen? I mean, can you even remember something like that happen, or
Yeah,
would you say it was all retrospective?
it is. I think I wasn't aware of it at the time. It was what was happening, but I think there was a calmness was sort of transcended me. And I think the more I walked, the more I started to. I wouldn't say accept the end of my marriage because it wasn't my choice. But I think I started just to acknowledge, okay, well, I can't control this. Someone else, my wife, she's made her decisions. She has to live the life that she wants.
Yeah.
And so there was a calmness, and I'm like, okay, this is what I'm doing at the moment. I'm quite happy with this. This is fine. It's okay. I don't have the answers yet as to what's next, but this is fine. And I think something about meeting new friends, people from different, Italian friends. And we met, there was a French girl and a Brazilian guy and a Dutch girl as well. There was a group of us, and there was just something about their acceptance of you, and we accepted each other because we all have. Everyone sort of always seems to have a reason for walking.
Yeah.
And there was
no one's on the Camino for exercise.
Well, no, but you get fit in your mind, you say, and you get fit physically, because you can't help but get fit as you walk that length of journey every day. But you might, having said that, you come across people who've had illnesses and they realize they need to get fit or they need to lose weight, and so it's strange in that way. But yeah, so I think I was becoming calmer and more, I was out of panic mode. Panic mode had gone, and I was walking, and I think, yes. And I think there were moments where I felt confident. You have to remember one of the things that, like I was in a marriage for 10 years. We were close, we did, everything together pretty much. And so I wasn't used to really doing things on my own again and being so independent and making friends outside of our relationship. And so being thrown into this Camino, I'm quite a sociable person anyway, I guess, but I didn't need to have to make, socialize with other people or new people, but I was making new friends of people. And I think one of the things which it taught me was I'm okay to be on my own. I'm okay. I can survive on my own. I don't have, whilst I missed my ex partner, I realized I can be on my own. And so there were days when we would walk together as a group, or there were days when I just wanted to be in my own company, and I'd say, okay, well, I'm going to walk on my own today. When you get to the next hostel, albergue, can you reserve a bed for me? And I'll just see you there at that village, depending on where we're walking. And there are times where there's different diversions of the main Camino. You can take different routes or alternative routes. And there'll be times when I felt like, do you know what? I'm just going to explore this route, and I just feel like I want the afternoon to myself. And I would do that, and interesting sort of diversions came, and I met new interesting people, or taken to a sort of remote chapel or church, and different things I saw, and which gave me different insights and different thoughts. And so I definitely began to relax into being with myself and on my own, and that was fine. So, and I did become aware of that, because I'm like, okay, I made a conscious decision. I'm not going to, whilst it was nice to always walk with the great friends I was making and their camaraderie, I'm like, no, I'm comfortable enough to go and do this on my own. And maybe I'll end up, and one day I took this as a remote monastery. I didn't see that group for another 3 days, but I went off to this remote monastery and made some new friends, and it was a really, great experience to show me that you can be independent and you can be happy within yourself and on your own.
Yeah. So the Camino, there's a whole lot of self-discovery going on, and I guess unlocking kind of potentials in yourself that you hadn't realized were there, or maybe have forgotten. Can you take me to that point where you then, because earlier you mentioned you realized there were different forces at work here. Can you take me to that point where you made that realization? Were you sort of looking back a few years later and then going, yeah, wow, there were so many different forces at play, and something dropped, like a penny dropped when you made that realization, even if it was in reflection? When did that happen for you?
Okay, I think, as I say, as I started to walk on my own at times, I started to realize there was something there guiding one in a way. You might just call it the path which was guiding me, the actual Camino path. But there was some force which kind of just said, yes, there is forces you don't even understand, but there are forces which can be helpful if you can somehow connect to them. And I was sort of aware of that, but that was daily. And I think as I was reconnecting to nature in a way, when I was experiencing, you start walking quite early in the morning, so often with the sun coming up, so experiencing sunrises and that nature, and seeing sunsets at the end of the day, and sort of being taken back into nature. That you knew that this was this land, this beautiful oasis that we occupy. There's got to be something greater than us, or we've got to be, or we're part of something so beautiful. And in your daily lives, when you're running around and you're in work or office or whatever, in the urban world, the sort of the work world, you become less aware of that. And so this reconnection with nature, I think, was also partly putting something in there with me. But I think, again, I didn't sort of pinpoint that. It was just sort of a growing sort of feeling, almost, you might say. And I was getting more confidence, definitely getting more confidence within myself to make choices and do things on my own, and be brave, and not have to walk with the same people all the time, and be aware, or just seek out the unexpected in the day, and see what happened. And again, in those situations, I would speak. Well, I had a little bit of Spanish because of my traveling in South America before, so I started to engage a bit more often with with some of the town people, villagers, and they're always helpful because they understand the Camino and its journey it takes you on. So they'd always want to ask you where you're from, and are you going all the way to Santiago, the end destination, etc. So I would talk more when I was on my own, with some of the locals. But I guess in reflection, what was the point that I realized that, okay, there is some greater force beyond which we are able to explain on a day-to-day life, sometime with the working life, you might say, the surface level life. And that's when I when I finally completed the Camino and arrived in Santiago, everyone's very emotional because they've arrived outside the Cathedral of Santiago, the Cathedral of St. James, the end destination, the end of the pilgrimage, and we're all emotional. There's a pilgrim's mass for everyone every day who completes the Camino in the cathedral. And some people might have some spiritual realizations there, etc. Again, I didn't, but I was like, do you know what? All these notes in my journal, I was just keeping them for myself. I'm like, I want to share them on a blog. So, the first time I created a blog, the first time I set up a website, a blog, a sort of simple WordPress blog I created, and I started to just write about my experience, my personal experience, the Camino, in a sort of essay form, and just put it out there and share it. And so I started that. Actually, at this point, I'd gone to Italy because my flat was still rented out, and some of the Italian friends I'd met invited me to Italy because they weren't immediately returning back to work either. Some of them, so they said, "Come and stay." So I was like, "Okay." I did that, and whilst I was in Italy and blogging a bit more, that story seemed to morph itself. Not story, but blog seemed to morph itself into a fictional story about a flamenco guitarist called Diego on his pilgrimage, and a coming of age story, and it's a story basically about him having the confidence or faith in his musical ability to become a flamenco guitarist, and pursuing that dream. And I'm like, when I started writing this, I guess you could get the phrase I kind of use sometimes. No longer were my legs walking, but my fingers were doing the walking, and something was connecting to my fingers and the story, but a fictional story about a flamenco guitarist. And I'm finding I'm sort of engaging or tapping in to sort of some spiritual forces which I wasn't aware of really, before I'd gone on this pilgrimage. And I'm like, there is something out there. There is something. There is a higher meaning, a higher purpose, something bigger that I was unaware of. And so when I started writing this book, that's when I really found it for sure, because I'm like, I want to share this. I want to share this through this fictional story.
Yeah, yeah. So you began to tap into this source of energy or power or something beyond
Mm,
what you felt was beyond you, what you felt was beyond your own,
mm,
you know, was not Steve writing almost. So it is, but it isn't. Is
yeah,
that kind of the
yeah. It was like I was aware of um, a source
yeah.
that if we put faith in it,
Mm,
it can help us on our way. And that was
wow.
what the pilgrimage did. It helped me on my way. It got me. It got me from crisis point. It got me to calm point. It got me to a calm point, and it started to make me aware. And so,
Mm,
and I guess what the pilgrimage did in terms of, and I guess especially tapping into uh, nature, was it kind of helped me tap into my creativity, which was probably always there, but I'd forgotten about, or apart from being a child, I did write stories as a child in school, and I was always a big reader, but I
mm,
didn't put anything more than that. I mean, and for the last sort of you know numerous years before I quit my career. Um, the only writing I would have done were sort of investment analyst research notes,
mm, yeah,
so
yeah.
those papers. And so suddenly the Camino gave me the gift of creativity, or reconnected me, you might say.
Yeah, yeah. So it's the simple wonder of nature and this whole experience of self-discovery, but also the calmness of your mind seem to weave this thread which bore its fruit later on when you actually sat down to recount this story and this fictional story evolved. That's quite a powerful vision too, because I can see this kind of, you talked about the flowers blooming and you talked about the sun rising and all these things. And I'm just like, okay, so this powerful force of nature that you were able to appreciate started to create these openings. And then it took you on this whole different life journey then.
Yeah, well, I think my senses were becoming alert to things again. So observational with nature, but but not just sight. It was sense. It was smell. I
Mm,
was smelling different smells. Whether it was just my first coffee in the morning at a cafe when I was walking, or the different aromas from flowers or agriculture, and then different sounds. Water flowing. Um, the rain on leaves, different. My senses were becoming more alert, and I think yes, that was the writing. I was remembering that how your senses are alert, and they connect to this wonderful planet that we live on.
yeah,
But
yeah.
we're all, and then I started to realize, well, but we're all connected because with the pilgrimage, wherever we were on the pilgrimage, along it, we were still walking the same journey to the same place and
Mm,
having our different experiences. But we were all connected along this one path, as is I now appreciate, as is mankind.
mm, yeah, that's pretty
Mm.
powerful stuff. Wow. Yeah, so that's definitely some insights that I didn't not have before from
Okay, okay.
from your journey
All
actually.
right.
Because I knew you'd actually started to write, and I knew that you had been on this journey, obviously, because you're my friend and we've talked about this. But I hadn't really realized when you had those doorways of awareness that open and stayed open for you from a point of view of even tapping into this higher source of power, or you called this higher source that was coming through you in your
Yes.
writing.
Yes.
So where is this sort of taking you now? And well, we kind of know it's brought you up to a certain point. So where would you say that's brought you to today, and how is that influencing where you go?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think, well, at this present moment in time, I think I now realise that I can have one foot in what you might call the real modern world, which is the world that I still need to occupy to make a living and survive, and then another foot in what you might call the spiritual world, the other world, which is also my world of creativity. And so I knew I didn't want to go back to financial services full time after completing the Camino. That was for sure. But I knew that beforehand, really. But at the same time, I still had to make a living. You know, I had to survive. So when I did return back to London and had written a first draft of a book, blogging it and it morphed into this book. So I had a first draft, and but I still I still needed to make a living still to pay the mortgage, so and bills. So I had a couple of short-term permanent jobs and then some contracting work within sort of the realms of financial services and the investment world. But I was also then working on the side on the story. I was then starting to think about, you know, what comes next after that, marketing a book and, you know, being an author and these things. So to the point where now I've juggled those things a bit, and I've kind of committed to being the author, being the creative person, and travel is my thing still. And I think I love the idea of getting outside of your comfort zone with travel, or, you know, exploration and journeys, and hopefully that inspires people to, you know, to perhaps get outside of their comfort zones or try something different in terms of their daily lives. I mean, travel doesn't have to be going to South America or walking the Camino for a month. I mean, travel can just be, you know, making a commitment to go for a daily walk in the park and maybe taking a different direction for the park, you know, but not so experiencing things.
It sounds
in
like
a different way.
it sounds like there is a much more intentional connection to nature that you've evolved as a consequence of this journey.
I think so, yes.
Because, you know, you talked about the sunrise, the fauna, you talked about the whole connection to nature being a trigger for you to this higher awareness. And in order for you to keep that one foot in this spiritual evolution of your creative self, sounds like nature has become really central to that for you as how you are showing up today.
Yeah, I think there is something. It's not just the vitamin D with the sun shining on you that sort of nourishes my body. There is a deeper nourishment that comes from nature, which, you know, I still can't explain because I don't know what, you know, about these forces. But there's definitely something deeper out there, which, when you're out in nature, reconnects you to, you know, I think, to yourself and to this world. And I think that I find that nourishing. So to get out and explore and travel, it's something which I think we can all benefit from. And I think that is something which my books have been trying to inspire people to do. And I think I can do that in my daily life. So so at this point now, I think I'm at a point where I work. You know, it's been a while since I returned. You know, I've been in the corporate, permanent, full-time job. You know, and I'm unlikely to return to that. So I'm more committed to say, okay, in this world, how does that intersect with my life of exploration, writing, creativity? And I'm at this point now where I'm comfortable with that, but I also have to, you know, do the real world stuff in terms of building my brand, building myself, and, you know, so I'm working on a third book, and, you know, I feel confident in that, knowing that it will come as long as as long as I don't panic about it. The overwhelming thing of, like, I have to have the you know, all the rewards now. I have to have the big income now, etc. I have to treat it like another Camino. That as long as I'm walking in the right direction, taking daily steps towards that, I will get there. You know, with a practical head on as well, in terms of, you know, the bills.
So it sounds like there's this deeper trust as well that you've got there. So
I think so. Yeah, and that's taken time. That evolved. You know, it wasn't just in Santiago. That's evolved since then. And I've been back on the Camino a couple more times. There's different Camino paths which lead to Santiago, and that has involved research from the second and third book I'm working on. So each time, you know, I think, you know, you have, you know, where people go don't say return to a meditation retreat or something, which I know you've done several occasions. We have to foster, we have to renew our creative soul. And so returning to the Camino a couple of times has sort of refreshed my creative soul, and that's helped me evolve on this path to have the faith and trust that has come with this awakening.
Wow, thank you. That was really, really beautiful, actually. It's I know you're a writer, but it is poetic.
Okay.
So yeah, thank you for sharing that story. I think it's actually quite a nice picture you've built up for us as well, listening, as to how you've gone from practically just living in a normal mundane existence. And I'm sort of putting words in your mouth when I say that, because you didn't describe your life as mundane, but I'm just being a little bit cheeky and saying that actually you didn't realize this other layer of reality until you took this journey, but till the circumstances in some ways even pushed you onto that, where you went from running from your pain, and I guess maybe yourself, to walking, to slowing down, to actually stopping and becoming aware of this. So thank you so much. Yeah, I don't actually have anything else to ask you. I feel that's a really nice complete story of that journey. And if there's anything else you want to add, then it's a good time to do that. But all I want to say is thanks so much.
No, that's all. I really enjoyed having the opportunity to share some of my thoughts on that. And yeah, I was so glad that I maybe caught you off guard a little bit, and some things you didn't know about me. And
yeah.
Well, I mean, if you have any other things come to mind, I guess this conversation can continue over a glass of wine at some point.
Yeah, I'm sure it will. Yeah. Thanks so much, Steve.
Brilliant. Thanks again.
What is most meaningful for you in 2022? Is it healing and forgiveness? Is it love and belonging? Or maybe it's the courage to be and to act? SOAR Book Club has all of this for you. If you want to read more and need accountability to keep you moving forward in your already busy life, are you looking for inspiration to develop your spiritual awareness? Maybe you want to be part of a positive community during these uncertain times, or connect with like-minded people who love stories and books. Then join SOAR Book Club. Hop on board. The train is about to leave the station, and I would love to have you on the journey with me. So click the link below to join. That's SOAR Book Club with me, Calvin Niles. I hope to see you there.